Hello, everyone.
Happy Wicked Wednesday.
Happy Wicked Wednesday. Welcome to Death Do Us Part.
Welcome to our 6th episode.
Woo! Yes, it's our 6th episode.
I'm Chris.
I'm Samantha.
And we're ready to get this thing kicked off.
We are. And what better way to celebrate a 6th episode than to talk about exorcisms?
I like where you're going with this.
Lucky number 6.
Let's go.
So, yeah. Before we get into it, I have to say, this season of American Horror Story this year
Fire
is amazing.
Shout out.
Honestly, I started to feel a little discouraged over the last couple years because nothing really compared to Murder House. I love Murder House. That is my favorite in the entire world. So I just have to say, American Horror Story is the shit this year.
It's really good.
We all see this connection with, obviously, Friday the 13th. And my friend actually pointed out that it's also related to the original Halloween. If you notice that, Mr. Jingles, if you haven't watched it, you have to watch it. But Mr. Jingles, escapes, the place that he was at.
With the help of the doctor.
Yeah, with the help of, yeah. So it's kind of, related to Halloween, and it's so good. Every week when the episode ends, I'm me and Chris just look at each other, and I'm I can't wait another week.
I know.
But today's Wicked Wednesday.
There's a lot of stuff going on all at once, though.
Yeah, it's the third episode, and so many things start out. So many things happen. It's very, what is that word? High, it's packed with a lot of shit.
High action?
High action, yeah, action. It's scary as soon as you turn it on. So I'm excited to see what happens this week. If you guys haven't watched it, you definitely should watch it. It's pretty good. In. It's not like Coven. I mean, Coven was alright, but it's better.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about real life possessions and exorcisms.
Real life exorcisms.
The first real-life exorcism we're going to discuss tonight is the story of Clara Germana Selly. Clara was a South African orphan and was baptized as a baby. In 1906, when Clara was just 16 years old, something very sinister happened to her. It said that Clara wanted to make a pact with the devil, and that in turn led to her demonic possession. The girl talked about it during her confession, but she never explained what she wanted to obtain in exchange for the pact. A nun at St. Michael's notes that Clara showed symptoms of possession pretty early on. The nun also stated that the young girl could speak and understand languages that she would have no previous knowledge of.
Like Harry Potter, when he was speaking in the snake tongue.
I've never watched Harry Potter.
Just take my word for it.
Okay. Other changes in Clara's behavior included clairvoyant skills. Clara could reveal the most private information about a person and secrets about people close to her, even people she's never met before.
So she was a medium?
Well, she was a clairvoyant. So this is early on with her.
What's the difference between a clairvoyant and a medium?
A clairvoyant can't, I'm not really sure.
I said buoyant, like they float.
Why don't you Google it and find out and then let us know at the end.
Okay.
Another sign of Clara's possession was her intolerance to be blessed by holy objects, such as holy water. It was become very noticeable that she would become very aggressive and would show an extraordinary increase in physical strength. Clara would produce a very frightening sound, which could only be described as an animal-like sound. But to me, after doing some research, it sounds more like a beast sound coming from this little girl. Because a nun at the school was quoted saying, "No animal ever made such sounds, neither the lions of East Africa nor the angry bulls. At times it sounded like a veritable herd of wild beasts orchestrated by Satan, or the devil had formed a hellish choir." I think it sounded probably worse than that, more like yeah, more like that. Eventually, an exorcism was performed. During my research, I read that Clara tried to strangle a priest with his own stole during the exorcism. It was even stated that Clara levitated 1.5 meters in the air, both vertically and horizontally. And when the priest would sprinkle Clara with holy water, her skin would burn as the water would touch her. After a long 2 days of performing the exorcism, a horrific and obnoxious smell began to leave Clara's body. At that moment, the girl was freed of the demonic creature and went on to live a normal life. But it gets worse. I wanted to start you guys out with like a pretty easy short one because the next one's even worse. And literally, I felt like I got some sort of like, I don't know. I felt so much emotion doing research on the next story. So, Chris, you're going to have to help me read this one because there's a lot to it.
Okay.
So, the next possession we're going to dig into is the story of Annalise Michael.
The movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose was based off the actual happenings of this young girl. Annalise grew up Catholic in Bavaria, West Germany in the 1960s, where she attended Mass twice a week. One day at the age of 16, Annalise blacked out at school and that day walked around very dazed. She has no recollection of that happening, and her friends and family saw her in a trance-like state. A year later, a similar event happened. The girl awoke in her bed in another trance-like state, but this time it was a little different. She had wet the bed and started shaking and having uncontrollable convulsions. After that second time, Annalise saw a neurologist who diagnosed the girl with temporal lobe epilepsy. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a disorder that causes seizures, loss of memory, and you can also experience visual and auditory hallucinations.
After Annalise's diagnosis, she started taking medication to help relieve the symptoms and enrolled in the University of Würzburg in 1973. Unfortunately, the prescribed meds Annalise was given was not helping her. As the year went on, her condition began to deteriorate. She continued to take the medication, however, but Annalise began to believe she was being possessed by a demon and knew in her heart that she needed to find a solution outside of the medication to help her. Annalise would hear what she believed was demons whispering in her ears. There was a night that she was praying and she heard the words whispered in her ear, "damned," and "rot in hell." Annalise reached out to priests and clergymen to help rid her of this demon. She was rejected and told that she needs to seek medical attention. And they needed permission from the bishop to help her at all. Her behavior became very irrational. Believing she was possessed, Annalise would rip off all of her clothes and would compulsively perform up to 400 squats a day.
Wow.
She even crawled under a table and barked like a dog for 2 whole days. The girl would eat spiders and coal and even ate the head off of a dead bird at one point.
Ozzy Osbourne much?
I thought of that when I was doing this research, actually.
A lot of what she does reminds me of Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah, it's so sad, though.
Could he possibly be possessed?
I mean,
or
back
what,
in the
maybe
day,
he was possessed?
He could have been, or it could have been all this stuff that he put into his body. There was even record of Annalise licking up her own urine off of the floor. Then after, Annalise and her mother finally found a priest named Father Ernest Alt. He believed in her possession and stated in later court documents that she didn't look like an epileptic. Annalise wrote to Father Alt, "I am nothing. Everything about me is vanity. What should I do? I have to improve. You pray for me." And also once told him, "I want to suffer for other people, but this is so cruel."
Father Alt petitioned the local bishop, Bishop Joseph Stengel, who eventually approved the request and granted a local priest, Arnold Renz, permission to perform an exorcism, but ordered that it be carried out in total secret. After the approval, over the next 10 months, 67 exorcisms took place. That's 67. Not one.
66?
Not 2.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not 3, but 67 exorcisms took place. And you're right, it's not 66.
Well, I was thinking 666, 66.
Oh.
It's episode 6.
Oh, speaking of 666, I did see a cab drive past me again this afternoon with the 666 phone number. It creeps me out every time.
I've seen that before too. I know what you're talking about.
So they lasted up to 4 hours each, and Annalise expressed that she was possessed by 5 different demons: Lucifer, Cain, Judas, Adolf Hitler, and Nero. All of these named demonic spirits would utilize Annalise's body and would communicate through her mouth with foul words and growls. It's like that. The spirits would argue with each other, with Hitler saying, "People are stupid as pigs. They think it's all over after death. It goes on."
That was a really good impression. I have to give that to you.
Thanks. And Judas saying Hitler was nothing but a big mouth who had no real say in hell. That impression wasn't as good.
No, I like the Hitler one, but go ahead.
All right. Annalise broke the bones and ripped the tendons in her knees from continually kneeling in prayer.
Also, I have to mention here that when these priests got involved, they discontinued consultations with the doctors. So the doctors were no longer involved. So keep that in mind when listening to this. Over these 10 months, Annalise was frequently restrained so the priest could conduct the exorcisms. Over the time, she slowly stopped eating, and she eventually died of malnutrition and dehydration on July 1st, 1976.
RIP.
After her death, Annalise's story became a national sensation in Germany after her parents and the 2 priests who conducted the exorcisms were charged with negligent homicide.
Get 'em.
They came before the court and even used a recording of the exorcism to try to justify their actions.
Is that the one that's available online?
That is available online, and I think that we should play a clip.
All right,
So why don't we do that right now?
Not too much, though, because I can't.
No, we're not going to play too much, guys, just because I'm letting you guys know this right now. Even for me that loves all scary shit, it was a lot to deal with. So we're going to play a
It's
quick
in
clip.
German, so you're not going to understand anything unless you speak German.
But it's also very creepy. Like, you can hear the growls and everything. So here's the clip.
Ja.
Was kostbar ist der Rosenkranz. Kostbar. Rosenkranzknoten.
Der Ausklingen verstellen, nachnehmen, Sie müssen das Geld so schade für.
Dann kostet er was.
Bei dem schon. Gut Zeit oder auch Geld für.
Ach so, die Arbeit.
Ja, die Arbeit geht natürlich vor.
Now, that was some fucked up shit.
That really was. That, like, when we listened to that, some parts last night, like, I honestly felt a little sick. Just thinking about this girl dying. Like, they cut off all ties from doctors, and they took it upon themselves, thinking that it's a religious thing, like, they can help this girl.
Take notes, anti-vax mothers.
Okay, so the 2 priests were found guilty of manslaughter resulting from negligence and were sentenced to, oh my God, 6 months in jail, which was later suspended, and 3 years of probation. The parents were exempted from any punishment as they had, in quotes, suffered enough. A criteria for sentencing in German law.
Interesting. Following the trial, Annalise became an icon for some Catholics who felt modern secular interpretations of the Bible were distorting the ancient supernatural truth it contains. The surprising thing was that people connected to Annalise were all completely convinced that she had really been possessed. Remembers Franz Barthel, who reported on the trial for the regional daily paper The Main Post. Buses, often from Holland, I think, still come to Annalise's grave, Barthel says. The grave is a gathering point for religious outsiders. They write notes with requests and thanks for her help and leave them on the grave. They pray, sing, and travel on. While she may be a source of inspiration for some religious people, the story of Annalise Michael is not one of spirituality triumphing over science, but of people who should have known better than allowing a mentally ill woman to die. It's the story of people projecting their own beliefs, hopes, and faith onto a woman's delusions and the price that was paid for those beliefs.
That is so sad, because when I first was doing research on this, I'm like, oh my God, this could have been, like, it could or it could not have been a real possession. We don't really know. But if it wasn't a possession, this is the fact that this girl died during this whole thing because of malnutrition, like, and dehydration. I feel like it could have been prevented if they had her in the right,
At least
care
have
with
an
doctor.
IV hooked up.
Something. So it's like
Pedialyte.
the Catholic Church got involved. They wanted to do things their way. They wanted to exclude all doctors, and the girl died. Like the pictures, I shared a picture on our page of her before she was sick. You guys can do your own thing because I don't want to like exploit her. Like I know this happened a long time ago, but it's so sad.
It's sad.
But yeah, that's the story of Annalise. So the story that we're going to do next, we're going to give credit to ghoststory.co.uk. And this is actually about a house being possessed rather than a person. So Chris, you want to start us out with it?
From 1974 to 1987, one of America's most terrifying hauntings took place. It was the home of Jack and Janet Smurl. Although their house was exorcised 3 times in investigations conducted by demonologists, the entity refused to leave. Jack and Janet had moved to West Pittston, Pennsylvania from Wilkes-Barre to escape the flooding damage left behind from Hurricane Agnes in 1972. They moved into a duplex Jack's parents had purchased, sharing the house with them. Jack and Janet had their 2 daughters, Dawn and Heather, lived in one half, and Jack's parents lived in the other. The house has been built in 1896 and was on a quiet street in the middle-class neighborhood. Both Jack and Janet had grown up in the area, meeting in 1967 and marrying in 1968. Jack served in the Navy, becoming a neurophysicist technician. Both the Smurls were raised in Catholic homes and had strong religious beliefs. They enjoyed living with Jack's parents and had no trouble sharing the duplex with them. The family did some remodeling and redecorating work on the house and had settled into it, and Jack and Janet added twin girls Shannon and Karen to the family. The first 18 months on Chase Street were happy ones.
In January 1974, a year and a half after moving in, the atmosphere in the house began to change. It all started with the appearance of stains on the new carpet. Several days later, the television burst into flames. Then the events became more disturbing. The newly fitted sink and bathtub were found severely scratched as if a large animal had clawed at them. Freshly painted woodwork in the bathroom also showed similar scratches.
The twins.
Blame it on the twins. Well, that's what we always did growing up.
In 1975, their oldest daughter, Dawn, repeatedly saw people floating around her bedroom. The paranormal activity in the house increased as toilets would flush without anyone using them. Footsteps would be continuously heard on the stairs. Drawers would open and close on their own accord. Radios would blare although they were unplugged, and empty rocking chairs would mysteriously rock and creak as if someone were actually sitting in them. As time went on, they began to smell sour and vile smells throughout the house, and on several occasions, Jack felt the touch of an unseen hand caress him.
By January 1985, the poltergeist activity was no longer confined to Jack and Janet's side of the duplex. Jack's parents, John and Mary, were also subjected to frightening events. The house would become icy cold, and they would hear what appeared to be violent shouting on Jack and Janet's side of the home, with abusive and foul language. Motherfucker! In February 1985, Janet heard her name being called while in the basement doing laundry. After searching,
Janet.
I think I have to say this. They're Jack and Janet, but it keeps on making me think of my pop-up and grandmom because they were John and Janet.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
2 days later, in the kitchen, the temperature dropped rapidly, becoming icy cold. A black, human-shaped form with no facial features appeared to Janet in the kitchen. It disappeared through the wall and appeared to Mary on the opposite side of the house. From that point on, the haunting activity increased in both frequency and magnitude.
Physical violence towards the family escalated. A large ceiling fan crashed down inches from Shannon, nearly killing her on the night her now 13-year-old sister, Heather, was to be confirmed into the Catholic religion. Janet was violently pulled off her bed after making love to her husband, get it, Jack, while he lay paralyzed, gagging from a foul odor.
Oh my God.
Was it Janet or was it
No,
the ghost?
it wasn't.
Even the pet German Shepherd was tormented, picked up, and thrown repeatedly.
Oh my
That poor
God.
dog.
Why do
German
people-
Shepherds are no joke.
I know, but why do people... this just jogged my memory, but why do people always feel worse for dogs than they do for humans when the dogs
I know, that
are...
was the first reaction.
That was. Like, you didn't really give a shit. You talked about Janet being smelly, not her being thrown around.
I didn't realize.
All right.
The Smurl
Continue.
family was growing frustrated and fatigued by the increasing paranormal activity. Ed and Lorraine Warren were
Ooh.
contacted. Hey, shout out Ed and Lorraine.
I mean, R.I.P. They are both
Rip,
gone, but they
rip.
were in our last episode.
Rip Warrens. They were contacted by Janet in 1986 for help. The Warrens are well-known physical researchers and demonologists from Connecticut. The Warrens claim to have investigated over 10,000 hauntings during their career. Ed and Lorraine Warren were among the very first investigators to investigate the Amityville haunting. Janet had heard about them and in desperation asked them for help in spite of her skepticism.
The Warrens were accompanied by Rosemary Frew, a registered nurse and psychic. They began the investigation by quizzing the Smurls about their religious beliefs and the happiness of their family life and whether they ever practiced Satanism, occultism, or used a Ouija board, or in any way invited the supernatural into their home. Then the Warrens and Frew explored the house, identifying the bedroom closet as the crossover point between the two sides of the duplex. The team said they detected the presence of 4 evil spirits. 3 were minor,
And
but
one
the
was R.
fourth-
Kelly.
Oh my God. 3 were minor, but the 4th was a demon. And this makes me think of the Poltergeist, the movie The Poltergeist, because the portal is in the closet.
With no evidence of family dysfunction, occult invitation, or tragedy, the Warrens surmised that the demon must have been dormant, possibly for decades. According to the Warrens, it had arisen to draw on the emotional energy generated by the Smurls' daughters' onset of puberty.
Oh. The Warrens tried twice to provoke the demon to expose itself by playing tapes of religious music and confronting it with prayer. The demon reacted by violently shaking a mirror and dresser drawers, and yet another instance by spelling out, "You filthy bastard, get out of this house."
Why do you say it in a southern
know.
accent? You filthy bastard, get out of this house.
We don't want to offend anyone.
All right, one more time.
You filthy bastard, get out of this house.
Good job. Only holy water and prayer seemed to stop the manifestation.
The actions of the Warrens seemed only to make the situation even worse. Jack Smurl was raped by a succubus.
Oh my God.
Fuck.
Oh my God. Okay, go ahead.
For those of you who don't know, a succubus is a female demon who sleeps with you. Well, not exactly sleep, they do a little bit more than that. The succubus was described as an old woman with a young body. Her eyes were red and her gums were green. Several days later, Janet claims to have been sexually assaulted by a shadowy humanoid figure. She recalled hearing pig noises, a sign of serious demonic infestation, coming from within the bedroom walls.
When the Smurls' attempt to involve the Roman Catholic Church for help failed, the Warrens brought in Father, now Bishop, McKenna, a traditionalist priest who said Mass in Latin and performed more than 50 exorcisms for the Warrens. He conducted the ancient rite, which did nothing but infuriate the demon.
God damn it!
After the failure of the Warrens to quell the poltergeist activity, the Smurls invited a medium, Mary Alice Rinkman, who visited the house and collaborated the Warrens' findings of 4 spirits. She identified one as an elderly woman named Abigail, and another as a dark mustached man named Patrick, who had murdered his wife and her lover. Oh, Patrick came home, he's like, "You ain't doing this on my watch." Patrick had then been lynched by a mob who was like, "No, Patrick, you can't do that." And she could not identify the third, but the fourth was a powerful demonic presence.
Father McKenna performed a second exorcism in late spring, but the haunting continued, and even attempts to escape the haunting were also unsuccessful. The family was followed on a camping trip, and Jack Smurl was even having paranormal experiences at work. In desperation, the family decided to turn to the media for help. The resulting press coverage opened the floodgates, and the Schmirls' home became a tourist attraction, press magnet, and forum for skeptics.
After repeated refusals by the church to help, Jack Schmirl decided to appear on television. Remaining anonymous behind a screen, they were interviewed by Richard Bay on a local Philadelphia show called People Are Talking. Immediately after returning home, the demon retaliated. It levitated Janet and then hurled her against the wall. Later that night, Janet was throttled and thrown about by invisible forces, while Jack was raped by a monstrous creature resembling a pig on 2 legs.
Oh my God, this is awful.
Jack is just not having a good time.
No, he's not.
Or is he?
It's awful. At least it's an or a succubus instead of an incubus, though. Oh no, I can't say that.
No, I think this time... Yeah, don't say that, but I think this one was an incubus.
This is an incubus.
I'm assuming this pig got him.
Oh my God, this is scary. After repeated refusals by the church to become involved, the media coverage finally motivated the Scranton Diocese to offer an investigation into the Schmirls case. A third exorcism, performed by Father McKenna, brought a stop to the activity. In December 1986, however, after only 3 months of freedom from the torture, Jack saw a dark form beckoning to him. He clutched his rosary and prayed and hoped this was simply an isolated incident. It was not. The banging started again, as well as the putrid smells and violent poltergeist activity. Frustrated, tired, and hopeless, the Schmirls moved to another town. Shortly before the release of a book concerning their ordeal, The Haunted went to press. The church performed a fourth exorcism in 1988, which finally seemed to have brought peace to the property. A movie version of The Haunting was released in 1991.
Wow, that was some deep shit.
That really was, because that went beyond the other stories that we talked about. Like, sexual assault was...
A lot of it.
Yeah, and it was...
It wasn't just one
and
finger,
succubus.
2 fingers.
Stop. That's going too far. But that was terrible. But then... Did you hear the end? Obviously, we read it, but if you notice at the end, they made a movie about it. And this family started going to the media about it, so I bet they made a couple bucks off of their suffering. So
Cashed in.
I wonder how they're doing now. We got to look into that.
Do you think maybe they elaborated some of the story?
I don't know. That's what got me thinking, because they go to the media and they're doing all these interviews, and a movie was made. So maybe some things were fabricated.
Yeah.
I guess we'll never know.
Never.
But yeah, that really was a crazy story. But speaking of movies, the next story that we're going to do tonight was actually the inspiration for the movie The Exorcist. It was based off of a young boy named Roland Doe. And that was actually, like, throughout documents, his name's kind of changed. So when we go over this, you'll hear, like, Ronald or Roland, like... So no one really knows what his real name was. That was kept confidential.
Okay.
So we're going to get into that. And this will be our last story of the night, and it's a scary one.
Haunted history.
The story begins in the late 1940s in Washington, D.C. A 13-year-old boy whose name was believed to be Ronald but eventually was called Roland Doe throughout different documents and literature experienced the loss of his Aunt Harriet. Prior to the aunt's death, she had mentioned to him about the possibility of communicating with spirits through a spirit board or a Ouija board. In January 1949, shortly after Aunt Harriet's death, strange things started to happen. Ronald would hear scratching sounds coming from the floor and the walls in his room. He would also hear rushes of water coming out of pipes. Very often, and the most significant encounter was that his mattress would move on its own. Disturbed, Ronald's family sought the help of every expert they knew. The family consulted doctors, psychiatrists, and their local Lutheran minister, but they were no help. The minister suggested that the family seek assistance of Jesuits. Talk about jumping the gun, the local Catholic priest Father Hughes got permission from his superiors to perform an exorcism on the young boy in February 1949. However, the exorcism was stopped when Roland broke off a piece of spring from the mattress that he was strapped down with and lashed the priest across the shoulders with it. It was only a few days later when red scratch marks appeared on the boy. One of the scratches formed the words Louis. The family believed that it was a sign that they needed to relocate to St. Louis, where the extended family resided, to save the boy. A cousin of the family was attending St. Louis University at the time of Ronald's struggles. He put the family in touch with Father Walter H. Halloran and Reverend William Bowdern. After consulting with the university's presidents, the two Jesuits agreed to perform an exorcism on young Ronald with the help of several assistants. The men gathered at the residence on Roanoke Drive in early March of 1949. It was then, when the exorcist occurred, there was witness of scratches on the boy's body and the mattress moving violently. These were the same types of things that had happened when the first exorcism failed.
Amid these bizarre happenings, Baldwin and Halloran, according to reports, noticed a pattern in Ronald's behavior. He was calm and normal during the day, but at night, after settling in for bed, he would exhibit strange behavior, including screaming and wild outbursts. Ronald would also enter a trance-like state and start making sounds in a guttural voice. The priest supposedly also saw mysteriously flying objects in the boy's presence, and noted that he would react violently when he saw any sacred object presented by the attending Jesuits.
At one point during the week-long ordeal, Bowdern reportedly saw an X appear in scratches on Ronald's chest, which the priest believed signified the number 10. In another incident, a pitchfork-shaped pattern of red lines moved from the boy's thighs down to his ankles. These types of things happened every night for more than a month, and everyone witnessing the events believed that Ronald was possessed by 10 demons. The two priests never gave up as they continued the exorcism night after night. On the evening of March 20th, the exorcism reached an unhealthy new level. Ronald urinated all over his bed and began shouting and cursing at the priest. Now, Ronald's parents had had enough. They took him to Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis for more serious treatment. Finally, on April 18th, a miracle occurred in Ronald's room at Alexian Brothers. It was the Monday after Easter, and Ronald awoke with seizures. He yelled at the priest, saying Satan would always be with him. The priests laid holy relics, crucifixes, medals, and rosaries on the boy.
At 10:45 p.m. that evening, the attending priest called on St. Michael to expel Satan from Ronald's body. They shouted at Satan, saying that St. Michael would battle him for Ronald's soul. 7 minutes later, Ronald came out of his trance and simply said, "He's gone." The boy recounted how he had a vision that St. Michael vanquished Satan on a great battlefield.
There were no more documented instances of strange occurrences and behavior after that. Ronald went on to live a completely normal life from that moment forward. Following the exorcisms of Roland Doe, his family moved back to the East Coast. Sources say that Ronald found a wife and started a family. He named his first son Michael after the saint believed to have saved his soul. Bowdern, on the other hand, died in 1983 after serving the Catholic Church for decades. Halloran lived until 2005 when he died of cancer. He was the last surviving member of the main team that had performed the exorcism on Roland Doe.
The room in Alexian Brothers Hospital was boarded up and sealed following the exorcism. The entire facility was torn down in 1978. The house where the family lived in Maryland is now an empty lot after it was abandoned in the 1960s. As for the cozy house on Roanoke Drive, it sold to new owners in 2005 for $165,000. Perhaps the buyers embraced the property's legendary reputation that claims that Satan may have once lived in an upstairs bedroom.
This is making me, doing this whole episode is making me want to watch The Exorcist.
Yeah, I know.
We gotta watch it. But I remember when I was a kid, my mom never, I'm not throwing under the bus mom or anything, but she always let us watch scary movies. So I grew up watching The Exorcist, and I remember getting older and being about 13 years old, and me and my friend Leah used to watch it and crack up watching it. But we would, there's a lot of boring parts in The Exorcist. I don't know. when they're outside of the girl's bedroom, it's pretty boring, I must say. But me and my friend would fast forward all the boring parts, and we would watch all the scary parts and just die laughing. So, yeah. So we hope that you guys loved all of our stories tonight. That's all we have for you for our 6th episode. You get it? We had to do, exorcism sessions for our 6th episode. But yeah, so we hope everyone enjoyed it. We hope everyone has a great Wicked Wednesday. And we hope you guys tune in next week. Good night.